All right, welcome to our weekly wellness sessions for musicians. My name is Jessica Koebbe. I've got my DMA and other degrees in piano performance, and I specialize in helping teachers learn how to address performance anxiety and adopt mindfulness practices in their private teaching. I teach at Mid-American Nazarene University, and I'm the founder of Mindful Music Pedagogy. I'm joined today by my colleague, Francesca Leo, who holds a master's degree in flute performance, is the chair of the Puerto Rico Flute Symposium Wellness Committee, and the founder of playingwithoutpain.com. So our first few sessions have addressed the relationship between the body and the brain as it relates to breathing. Then at the end of 2020, we shifted over to kind of looking at the relationship between the brain and the body. And then all the sessions are archived on Puerto Rico Flute Symposium's Facebook page, as well as playingwithoutpain.com and mindfulmusicpedagogy.com. If you're a music educator and you want to share this video with your students, we do offer the recorded Zoom sessions that you can find on diazdelmoralfoundation.org/wellness for musicians, or on the other sites mentioned, Playing Without Pain and mindfulmusicpedagogy.com. And you can share those MP4 files directly with your students. So today, we're going to continue this idea of how the brain really functions best as it relates to the breath and the body. And Francesca is going to explain the benefits of efficient practicing and lead us through some research-based efficient practicing tips. As we go along, if you've got questions, go ahead and drop it into the comments of the live stream. We'll address it either in real time or in a future session. And if you would like to, you can make a donation. You can visit the link in the description, which is the PayPal link for the Diaz del Moral Foundation. You can also reach us via email, and our email is wellness@prflutesymposium.org. All right, so I invite you to take a breath, and I'll turn things over to Francesca. You're muted, Francesca.
Great. Okay. Thank you for that. So thank you for that wonderful introduction. I'd like to start today's session by sharing a quote with you by Arthur Rubinstein. Never practice more than 3 or 4 hours a day. No one can concentrate longer than that. And you must spend the rest of your time learning about life and love and art and all of the other wonderful things in the world. If a young person sits in the practice room all day, what can they possibly have to express in their music? So efficient practicing is a wonderful method of increasing productivity in the practice room while reducing the amount of time that you spend on your instrument each day. Efficient practice is the act of working towards a set of goals with clear intentions and smart strategies to quickly bring music to performance-ready condition as defined by the author of The Musician's Way book, Gerald Klickstein. So also, if you don't have that book, this is a great resource on efficient practicing, and I can share the cover of the book with you a little later on. So many students, professional musicians, and teachers often have limited time for individual practice and a significant amount of repertoire to learn by certain dates. It's really important to develop a method of practicing that allows you to both learn repertoire quickly and efficiently while maintaining full attention to detail and musicality. So when my performance-related injury was at its peak during my undergraduate degree, I developed a bad habit of punishing myself in the practice room. I used to practice for hours on end, taking no breaks and really only stopping when I absolutely had to. This often resulted in running passages over and over again, making the same mistakes, but refusing to stop playing until I heard a noticeable improvement. I also had a tendency to cram practice, learning repertoire shortly before I had to play it for rehearsals and private lessons, and not really giving myself enough time to actually work on it mindfully. So when you're practicing under these types of conditions, with heightened stress levels and a lack of time to adequately prepare, your body is also likely holding a significant amount of tension while you're playing as a reaction to this stress. So efficient practicing requires less time spent in the practice room, but a much higher level of concentration and focus. So Gerald Klickstein has outlined 4 ways to increase practice efficiency. Number 1 is pinpoint your goals. Number 2 is keep to a schedule. Number 3 is use targeted and deliberate strategies that encourage problem solving and a sense of curiosity. And number 4 is to pace yourself. So start earlier on with more difficult passages and review them regularly, but do not over repeat them. You may also want to set time limits for working on sections and vary the order and ways in which you tackle them. So the Bulletproof Musician, you should definitely subscribe to Noah Kageyama's newsletter, bulletproofmusician.com, because you get a lovely gift of a wonderful article every Sunday in your inbox. So it's a great database for research-based articles on efficient practicing strategies. So each Sunday, you can pair these articles with the attendance of our weekly wellness sessions, and you will be all set to approach the week with mindfulness and efficiency. A recent article from the Bulletproof Musician outlines 3 questions to ask yourself that could boost the effectiveness of your next practice session. Number 1 is, what are some things I can do to help myself? Number 2 is, how else could I do this? And number 3, is there a way to do this even better? So deliberate or deep practicing involves a much higher level of concentration, and it requires a problem-solving approach to the passage that you're working on. So instead of engaging in quote-unquote mindless practice, for example, playing the same difficult run over and over again and making the same mistakes, try reducing the amount of repertoire you're trying to learn all at once, and maybe choose to just focus on one difficult run in a piece. So you may want to set a timer for 10 to 15 minutes and approach this passage mindfully and curiously. Chances are you'll be surprised at what you can achieve by engaging in deep and mindful work on a smaller scale. Also, this work is much more likely to stick as you proceed with the learning process of this piece, saving time in the practice room and also total time spent on your instrument each day. So now that we've outlined the benefits of efficient practicing, how do we begin to incorporate it into our daily routine? So I've created an efficient practicing template designed for 1-hour increments of time and can be adjusted as needed. So this is my efficient practicing template. There's a link to download it for free in both English and Spanish. The link is in the post description, so you can go ahead and click on that below. And this template can be repeated multiple times per day, depending on how much time you intend to practice. And then you can also incorporate the physical warm-ups that we learned in the last session at the beginning of each practice session. So the beginning of my efficient practicing template, which I might try and screen share in a little bit, it incorporates a lot of tips for efficient practicing and also for healthy practicing. So I use this outline, I print it out, and I'll write my plan for the day or for the practice session on it. And I find it really useful, and I hope that you will too. And I've taken a lot of the advice of Gerald Klickstein and Noah Kageyama and other guests that he's had on the Bulletproof Musician, in addition to my own experience and research. And I've kind of combined it all into one template that you can use. So I also want to talk about the human attention span. According to several studies, the average human attention span is really only 20 minutes long. It's recommended by professionals to take a 5-minute break every 15 to 20 minutes of playing as well. So by honoring your attention span, you can also take a break to also give your body a rest and give your mind a rest and come back to the next 15 to 20 minutes with full focus. So it can be helpful to write a list of your goals for each practice session at the top of the template that you download or at the top of a piece of paper. Maybe if you keep a practice journal, write down some goals that you have just for the first 15 to 20 minutes. And it's recommended you don't want to try and do too much at once because you want to be able to feel a sense of accomplishment after. So just take a really small section of music that you're having trouble with, and maybe, for example, there's a passage that you need to do some slow technical work on. So give yourself 10 minutes to approach that section mindfully and curiously, and approach it with a problem-solving sense of thinking as well. That usually helps me, and it also helps keep your brain in a positive mindset, which is really important. And like I said, the most important thing is not to try and be an overachiever and learn more music than you're able to handle intentionally, which I know is much easier said than done. But if you really engage in what we call deliberate practice, or deep and mindful and intentional practice, it can be really tiresome. So it's important to not to try to do too much all at once if you can avoid it, which is why it's important to just take a small section at a time, then take a break. It's also important to incorporate variety within this daily schedule. So doing the exact same warm-up routine and practicing the exact same passages can lead to burnout, limit productivity, and take away the joy and freedom that's possible during your practice sessions. So if you find yourself in a rut, you can also choose to substitute one 15 to 20 minute section of practice per day, and you can devote it to playing something you really enjoy, maybe improvising, or maybe transcribing a pop song on the radio. It's important to also incorporate joy into your practice sessions. Having a strict daily regimen for practicing works really well for some people, but for a lot, it can lead to exhaustion and tension because our bodies and minds tend to naturally rebel after a certain period of time of being told exactly what to do. So at this time, I am going to try and share my efficient practicing template. Okay. Can you see that? Great. It worked. Yay. Okay. So this is my efficient practicing template. There's a link to download it. The first section is efficient practicing strategies, create a repertoire list with deadlines, assess repertoire difficulty, and prioritize the newest or most difficult pieces that you're working on. So there's also some other strategies written there. And then we have a section for daily check-ins. And this is a nice way to, it can kind of serve as a journal prompt if you wanted to actually write down answers to these questions and just check in with yourself mentally and physically. See how you're doing, and that can also kind of determine what type of practice session you're able to have, or maybe how long. If you're feeling really tired and it's a low energy day, you may want to just shorten your practice session and just work on one or two things and then leave feeling a sense of accomplishment, but also honor your mind and body and know that it's important to rest as well. So I also have some additional reminders, and then you can go back and watch our physical warm-up video for tips on physical warm-up routines that you can add before practice sessions. And also, I wanted to mention, don't underestimate the power of mental practicing. So score study and listening to recordings is an essential part of practicing, and it's also a great way to give your body a rest, especially if you're feeling some pain or tension. So, like I said, this template is designed to represent a 1 hour block of time that can be repeated during the day, and here's the actual template. Can you see that too? Okay, great, cool. So you can write the date, time, the repertoire goals like we talked about. You can rank your repertoire list, so you can put the most difficult piece or the one that you are finding the most challenges with at number 1, and then maybe number 6 is a piece that you've played a lot before and you just want to brush up before the next time you have to perform it. Also a recommendation for physical warm-up time, musical warm-up, so it's important to not jump right into scales when you first begin practicing. Start slowly and mindfully. So if it's common for your instrument to practice long tones, that would be a great way to start. And I'd love to ask Jessica a question in 1 minute about how pianists can do that as well. So then there's recommendations for a break. The detailed repertoire practice will be one passage of music in one piece. Don't try and cram a bunch of pieces and passages into 15 minutes. And if you end up getting the work accomplished more quickly, you can add another one after that. And then another section for detailed work on another passage from a different piece or the same piece. And then at the end, there's a recommendation for an under-tempo run-through of the work that you had accomplished on the passage. So to kind of, it's a nice ending for your practice session to be able to see how much you've improved with intentional work in a short amount of time. So you can download that at the link in the description. And at this time, I'd love to talk to Jessica, get some of her efficient practicing tips as well, and also talk to you about what pianists do for slow warm-ups.
Yeah, well, let's start with the end then. The warm-up question. What you said about just kind of being attuned to how you're feeling that day is definitely, for me, something that I try to pay attention to. Also balancing it against like immediate needs and then kind of the time that I have. So those are the three big considerations that I find myself weighing when I'm deciding what to start with. So one of the things that I love about what I get to do is that I play a huge variety of literature. So I'm a church pianist and organist, and then I teach at university, and then I teach privately, and then I play with a lot of musicians around, and then I also try to keep up some solo things, and then I always have a few kind of longer term collaborative projects in the works. So for me, a lot of times what I really enjoy doing, I mean, I'm a pianist, I'm a type A. I love scales, I love arpeggios, I love like warm-ups that I know, And so if I have time for the day, I start there slowly and I don't try to do anything with the metronome. But other days I will start with something that I know if I need to get ready for church. A lot of times what I really enjoy doing is to warm up is to start with something that I'm going to have to play on the organ, but I don't have an organ to practice on. So I just do a lot of manuals work and figuring out, voicings or distributions for the different manuals, and then imagine that I'm playing the pedals, and, kind of make my feet go through the motions. And then other times, if I've got a lot of time, or if I'm feeling especially disconnected from my instrument or from my joy of the instrument, I will sit down and just noodle, like just improvise, or yeah, I kind of like you said, like find that pop song. Maybe I'll just have this earworm and then I'll just go, try to improv some chord progressions around that in my head. I mean, I'll play the chord progressions out loud, but have that earworm in my head. Yeah, so that's kind of where I am. And the whole crayon practicing is always hard because there's always something to do tomorrow or today, and so I love your prioritization list there, because as much as I would love to just have 4 hours
Right.
to know that I could practice, even then, and your quote was so apt, because my master's teacher told me the same thing. He was like, if you can't figure out how to get in, because I was practicing, 8 to 10 hours a day,
Wow.
because I was just the load that I had at the time. I was doing my master's, but then which had a large solo performance component, but also a very large collaborative component. And then I was an assistant. I had a graduate assistantship in playing for 2 very hefty studios there. So the workload was just almost not doable, but doable. But he finally came up to me and was like, if you can't figure out how to get what you're doing done in like 4 to 6 hours rather than 8 to 10, you're not being efficient enough. And so that was a big challenge, but I'm so glad that he said that, because in the way that us old people now chuckle towards our younger students, we're like, it only gets worse. He's right. My life has never gotten less hectic. So it's just efficiencies. And I had a question for you. Sorry, I'm just
Yeah.
how do you work? Like, I have to write things in my score all the time, because most of the time if I'm lucky, I'll get 2 times to look at it. But most of the time it's like, okay, I've got this 15 minutes and it's got to be done.
Yep.
And then it's going to the recording studio, or then it's going to be played at, something. So I don't have time to practice it. Like, I just have to do all the work right then, and then figure out how to package it back up to to perform it.
Yeah.
So I write in my score like crazy because I might have to do that on Monday and then not see it again until Saturday when I have to play it, you know?
Yeah.
Do you do that too, or how does that work?
Yeah, so that's a great point that you brought up, and that was something that I was going to mention too. Sometimes it's unavoidable the amount of time that you or it's unchangeable. You can't change the amount of time that
Right.
you use to prepare a piece, and like some often things get thrown at you last minute, and you have to just learn it. So yeah, this efficient practicing template, like it's more for repertoire that you have more time to learn, but for repertoire that you have to play like in a few days, I definitely take time to sit through and play it like slowly, and then
Mhm.
I identify which sections are the most challenging and
Mhm.
the ones that I spend the majority of the time on. But I definitely write in my music a lot. I used to write in my music so much to the point of it was almost unrecognizable. I have like I need to frame this, but my Daphnis and Chloe excerpt literally looks like chicken scratches written all over it. It's like it's so hard to read because I have so many notes on it from so many different master classes. But I still do make markings for myself, but I imagine with piano it's probably a lot more like technical markings of like of
Yeah.
and
Yes, it's usually fingerings because you don't have time to rework it. So,
yeah. No,
yeah.
that's great, and that's probably saving you so much time too, just to even sit and plan that out. Because sometimes it seems like something that might not be totally necessary, but to just sit down and actually figure it out just saves you so much time and stress, I can imagine. For me, I've been doing a lot of work with groupings, like
Yeah.
for friends,
Yeah.
practicing them in different groupings, which actually helps them. It, it feels a little bit easier to play sometimes if you have a really tricky run and you just think of it in a different way, which I'm sure you've done as well. That like somehow it just makes it click and it like takes like the fear out of it. I think just by like hearing it in a different way or practicing it in a different way, like with different groupings. Does that make sense?
Yeah. And then also you just know like, well, if something weird happens with the finger, you know you can get through it if even if it's not like if
Yeah.
you've only conceived of it and played it one way in your head, then it
Yeah,
completely
I think it also helps you practice it cleaner too, and there's more of a higher success rate when you play it because you've really broken it down and you've taken the time to practice it in a bunch of different ways. So no matter what happens in the performance, even if you do make a mistake, you can easily get back on track.
Yeah. Yeah. For
Yeah,
sure.
yeah, and mistakes are okay.
Well, that's the thing. And I liked what you said. Maybe this is something to explore in a later session, but you know, just being mindful about your practicing. That's something I talk about a lot and I try to do a lot. Of course, it's every time you sit down, it's just like exercising. You have to fight that battle every time, but no matter how often you do it. But just this getting a really good sense internally of gauging where you're at with a piece, with where you have to be with that piece and the time frame that you have,
Yeah,
and learning how to set the correct mental expectations so that the time that you're spending in the practice room, wherever you're at with the piece that day, is effective and will get you to where you need to be. Um, but I think for a lot of students, and certainly when I was younger, and even now, I still can fall prey to that. But that idea of like expecting perfection too soon, and then, like you said at the beginning, just sabotaging your practice session because you just have the wrong set of expectations going in and it's not even close to realistic for where you would be that day anyway, but then you just groove into this negative frame of mind and it's nothing productive happens after that.
absolutely. It's all about the mindset too. And like like you said, I would be in such a negative mindset when I just kept making the same mistake over and over again. And it wasn't only that I was viewing myself and my playing negatively because of that, but also I was ingraining the mistake. I was actually I was holding myself back from
Yeah.
progress by just not allowing myself to just approach it, with curiosity and problem solving and like just sit down and say, okay, I've made this mistake once or twice, so how can I work on this section differently that makes it easier to understand? And it's really like so much about the language in which you speak to yourself in the practice room too. Because I don't know about you, but I do not respond well to negativity from myself either. Like when I'm hard on myself, it makes me not want to work harder. It just makes me like paralyzed in like fear almost. But then when I approach it like, okay, well, it's okay that you made this mistake. How can I work on this better? Kind of like one of the things that Noah Kageyama's article said, like, how can I approach this better? And if you do find yourself in a really negative headspace, try it sometimes, because sometimes it's really hard to just talk positively, like just to like change like on the like on the spot like that. So it's important to also learn how to do neutral self-talk, implement neutral self-talk, and just accept like mindfulness, like accepting the situation for how it is right now, and then kind of learning to remove the emotion from it can be really helpful, especially if you're like in that spiral, which we've all been in, where you're just like, this isn't getting better, it's getting worse, I'm a terrible musician, then just keeps going down that path, which I know that many of you can probably relate to. But yeah, just learning some neutral affirmations for the practice room, like, I accept this for what it is. I made a mistake and that's okay.
I'll try again.
Yeah, trying to detach yourself from that is really helpful over time.
Yeah, there have been so many studies done about the impact of our mindset on our productivity, and even outside of music, well, especially outside of music, there've been a lot of studies done on that, but certainly this applies here too. And with our own negativity, as soon as we go down that spiraling road, we've closed the door on all opportunities to learn in that moment.
Yep.
Not to say that the whole thing's doomed, but you have to do a lot of heavy lifting to get yourself back to a good space.
Yeah.
So, but then also learning how to not engage in the mindset of others around you if it is not serving you well.
Yeah.
Learning how to not absorb other people's stress and then make it yours, when they were, because we're all at different places in our day and in our lives. So somebody may be having an awful day, and not that you want them to have an awful day by any means, but you can't let their day, impact you. You can't absorb it. Of course, being compassionate, and helping when you can, but putting up that a little bit of that shield so that you acknowledge and empathize and engage with them as much as you can to help without absorbing their feelings, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Especially in stressful environments, and music, I think, is just a stressful environment. It just is. So
Yeah. Awesome. Well, did you want to introduce our topic for next?
Oh yeah, let me share with you guys. I'm so excited. We've
Yeah.
been telling you that we've got some great guests lined up, and we really do. And starting next week, we're kind of going into our season of guests, and we're trying to pace it so that we have about 2 guests per month, and then a session with Francesca, or 2 sessions with Francesca and I each month as well. So next week, I'm so excited to share with you that we're going to be joined by Eddie Malave, who's a body mapping and Alexander technique teacher from, I'm sorry, remind me where he's.
New York. He plays on Broadway. He's a violist. And he's
At Juilliard. And
well, he went to Juilliard for several degrees, I believe, and he's a really wonderful person, and he's going to be talking about the benefits of creating a comfortable practice environment, which is really good for your mental health as well, kind of like what we were talking about. Just making sure that your environment matches what is going on inside your brain, or supports it as well. So he's going to be talking about the importance of the environment around you when you practice.
Yeah, so he'll be joining us next week live at 5 Eastern, 4 Central. If you want to look up any of our previous sessions, you can find them on the Puerto Rico Flute Symposium Facebook page. You can also find them on the Diaz del Moral Foundation website, playingwithoutpain.com, Francesca's site. and mindfulmusicpedagogy.com, which is my site. So again, if you've got questions, if you want us to be sure to ask Eddie a specific question, go ahead and email or comment below, and we'll be sure to get that to him. Have a great week.
Thank you.